Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going deep on a story that might not be on your radar, but it's one that really should be heard.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it is. We're talking about a woman who went toe-to-toe with Texas Rangers,
Oh, wow.
fought hard for education rights, and helped a lot of people during a really rough time.
Yeah.
Get ready to meet Jovita Idar. She was a real pioneer fighting for Mexican-American rights.
You know what's really interesting about Jovita Idar is she's finally getting the recognition she deserves. For so long, her story was kind of a hidden gem in history, but when you look at it, her impact is just undeniable.
I agree. And to really dive into her life, we're going to be looking at an episode of the Stuff You Missed in History Class podcast.
Yeah.
They did some great research on her
Hmm.
and brought her story to life in a way that's just really captivating.
It's really amazing how much they were able to find out, considering, how many historical documents get lost.
Yeah.
It really shows how important it is to dig deeper and try to find these untold stories.
So let's start with Jovita's early life. She was born in Laredo, Texas, back in 1885,
Okay.
just a few decades after Texas became a U.S. state. So it was a time of huge change.
Yeah.
And the whole landscape of the Southwest was, being reshaped.
It's pretty wild to imagine growing up in that kind of environment with all that tension and uncertainty.
Right.
Especially for Mexican Americans, it must have been really tough. I mean, they faced so much discrimination.
Yeah.
They were denied basic rights and opportunities all the time.
And Jovita's family, they weren't just going to sit back and watch this happen.
Nope.
They were really active in advocating for Mexican-American rights. Her father actually published a Spanish-language newspaper.
Oh,
It was
wow.
called La Crónica, and it became a strong voice for their community.
I mean, it wasn't just a newspaper. It was like a platform for social change. They talked about all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Education, civil rights, workers' rights.
It sounds like Jovita grew up immersed in these conversations and debates about how to improve things for her people. What a foundation.
Absolutely. You can tell that this family environment, with all its focus on education and being aware of social issues, had a huge impact on her.
Yeah.
It shaped how she saw the world and how dedicated she was to fighting for justice.
And the Idar family, they didn't just talk about it, they took action. La Crónica was really important in raising awareness about the injustices that Mexican Americans faced.
Yeah, for sure. They were shining a light on the realities of discrimination and fighting for equality. It's important to remember this was a time when racial tensions were incredibly high.
Yeah.
What some historians call Juan Crow, the systemic discrimination against Mexican Americans, it was everywhere.
It's a scary reminder of how deep these prejudices went. And tragically, there were these horrible instances of lynching, like what happened to Antonio Rodriguez in 1910.
Right.
He was accused of stealing a horse and was burned alive by a mob.
Mm.
It was unimaginable.
Yeah, these weren't just isolated incidents either. They were part of a bigger pattern of violence and intimidation. It was all about silencing Mexican Americans and keeping the power structure the way it was.
You can only imagine how these events affected Jovita and her community. It makes sense that she felt like she had to do something.
Yeah, it's clear that seeing those injustices fueled her passion for making a difference. And one of the ways she chose to do that was through education and journalism.
She actually started out as a teacher,
Oh, okay.
but she realized pretty quickly that she wanted to make a bigger impact. So she joined the family paper, La Crónica,
Okay.
and started using her voice to fight for the rights of her community.
She wasn't afraid to speak truth to power at all. She used pseudonyms sometimes, like Ave Negra, which means blackbird, and wrote passionately about civil rights, education, and even women's suffrage.
Wow.
She was really good at connecting with readers and inspiring them to get involved.
She even started a bilingual newspaper just for Laredo school children, encouraging them to try out journalism and to think critically about the world around them. It's amazing how she was already thinking about empowering the next generation at that point.
It really shows how much she believed in the power of education and being active in your community. She knew that if you want to change things for good, it's not enough to just fight for the present. You got to invest in the future, too.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just journalism she was involved with when it came to young people. Jovita saw how Mexican-American children were often denied a good education, so she took action and helped set up schools and programs just for them.
That's amazing.
She knew education was so important for giving them power and opportunity.
It's incredible to think about the impact she had on those kids' lives.
Yeah.
opening doors that might have stayed closed otherwise.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that just one person can make a real difference. And Jovita didn't stop there. She was a major force behind organizing El Primer Congreso Mexicanista, the first Mexican Congress. It was back in 1911, and it was a huge event. They had Mexican Americans from all over Texas and even Mexico coming together to talk about the problems they faced and to fight for their rights.
Wow, that must have been something. What were some of the big issues they were focused on?
Oh, they covered a lot of ground. School segregation, workers' rights, land ownership, voting rights.
Yeah.
It was a pretty bold agenda, especially for that time.
It's amazing to think that this was happening way before the civil rights movement that we usually hear about. Jovita and the other activists were really pioneers in the fight for equality.
Totally. And Jovita wasn't just there at the Congress, she was leading it.
Oh,
She was elected president of the women's division and started La Liga Femenil Mexicanista.
what was that?
It was a group that focused on social change. They set up schools for Mexican kids, provided health care, and became a strong voice pushing for equality.
Sounds like she was always pushing the limits,
Yeah.
challenging the status quo, and working her tail off to lift up her community.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the most famous moments in Jovita's life. Her face-off with the Texas Rangers. It was during the Mexican Revolution, and she was working at the newspaper El Progreso when the Rangers tried to shut them down for criticizing U.S. military policy.
Really?
Yeah, and Jovita stood right up to them, defending freedom of the press and refusing to be silenced.
That must have taken so much guts. To stand up to armed lawmen, especially in such a tense time, is really incredible.
It's become almost legendary, this incident. A real symbol of how she stood up to injustice. This picture of this small woman, barely 5 feet tall, facing down a bunch of Texas Rangers with guns, it's really powerful.
It's a real David and Goliath story,
Yeah.
and it really sums up who Jovita Idar was. Courageous, principled, and completely fearless.
Yeah, it reminds you that true courage isn't about being physically strong or powerful. It's about standing up for what you believe in, even when it's dangerous.
It's amazing to think about her legacy and how she still inspires people today.
And her bravery wasn't just limited to that one time. During the Mexican Revolution, she co-founded La Cruz Blanca, the White Cross,
Okay.
to give aid to wounded soldiers on both sides of the conflict. She even risked her life smuggling revolutionaries across the border to get medical care.
Wow. She was literally putting her life on the line to help people. That says a lot about her compassion and her belief in helping others.
It really shows how much she believed in the value of human life and how she was willing to act on what she thought was right, no matter the risk to herself.
She didn't stop there either. Later in life, she moved to San Antonio and kept up her activism. Founded a Democratic club, started free kindergartens, and worked hard with Mexican immigrants, helping them deal with a changing society.
This was at a time when the U.S. was making it harder to cross the border. The Border Patrol, visa requirements, head taxes, all that made it really tough for people trying to make a better life in the U.S.
It's a real reminder of the tough times immigrants have faced throughout history and how much policies can affect people's lives. Jovita saw these problems and did what she could to help immigrants get documents and navigate all the new restrictions.
It shows her empathy and how committed she was to social justice. She saw the people behind the policies and wanted to make a difference in their lives.
It's so inspiring how she never gave up, even when things got tough for her personally. I hear she had health problems in her later years.
Yeah, she developed diabetes and got tuberculosis, probably from working as a medical interpreter. And even with those challenges, she kept going with her activism. She was incredibly strong and dedicated to helping others.
It's sad to think about what those illnesses must have done to her, but it also shows how strong and determined she was. She's a true example of never giving up, even when things are hard. Makes her accomplishments even more impressive, right? Knowing she did all that while dealing with those health issues. Jovita Idar passed away in 1946 at the age of 60, but her legacy lives on. She's still inspiring people today.
And it's great that people are finally recognizing all she did. The Google Doodle, the New York Times Overlooked series, they even renamed a park in her honor in Laredo.
Yeah.
All important ways to acknowledge how much of an impact she had.
It's so good to see her getting that recognition.
Mhm.
It shows how things are changing, and it helps make sure her story gets passed down to future generations.
Yeah, and one of the biggest recognitions is that she's now part of the American Women Quarters program.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
To see her face on a quarter, along with other amazing women like Nina Otero Warren and Bessie Coleman, it's a powerful symbol of how far we've come in recognizing what women have done, especially women of color.
It is. When I saw that quarter for the first time, I was really proud. It reminds you that history is being rewritten to include those who were left out before.
And you know what's really cool about that quarter is the design.
Yeah, what about it?
Her blouse is made up of words that represent her life's work. Istra, nurse, La Cruz Blanca, Mexican-American rights. It's like a little biography right there on the coin.
That is a cool design.
Yeah.
It really captures who Jovita Idar was, all the different sides of her, and how dedicated she was to fighting for what's right. She was a journalist, a teacher, a nurse, an activist, and so much more.
Exactly. And that's what makes her story so fascinating. She didn't fit into any one box. She was a complex and dynamic person who fought passionately for what she believed in, no matter what got in her way.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Jovita Idar's life, what stands out to you the most? What's the main takeaway for you?
I think it's how committed she was to her community. From her early days as a teacher to her fearless journalism and her tireless advocacy, she never stopped fighting for a better future for Mexican Americans.
For sure. And she didn't just talk about it, she actually did something.
Yeah.
She organized, she wrote, she spoke out, she put herself at risk.
Yeah.
It reminds us that we all have a part to play in making society more just and fair.
I agree. Her story also shows how important it is to learn from the past and keep fighting for justice and equality. Those issues Jovita Idar faced 100 years ago, discrimination, immigration, access to education, they're still problems today.
That's a sobering thought, but it also shows how important her legacy is. Jovita Idar's story is a call to action. It tells us we can't just sit back and do nothing. We have to keep pushing for progress, keep fighting injustice, keep working towards a better future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And another big thing we can learn from her is how important it is to bring those hidden figures to light. All those unsung heroes who shaped our world but whose stories have been forgotten. Jovita Idar is just one example, but there are so many others out there waiting to be discovered.
It reminds you that history is full of surprises and there's always more to learn. So stay curious, everyone. Keep exploring and keep asking questions. And if you're liking these deep dives, make sure you subscribe to our show so you don't miss any future episodes. We've got some great stories coming up, and we can't wait to share them with you. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep those voices heard.